In 1637, a single tulip bulb sold for more than 10 times what a skilled craftsman earned in an entire year. People mortgaged their homes for flowers. Not gold, not land, flowers. And when the price collapsed overnight, entire families were financially destroyed. Now here is the uncomfortable part. We look back at that and laugh. We say, how could they be so stupid? But right now, April 2026, American household debt is sitting at record levels. Credit card balances have blown past $1.28 trillion. The average individual is carrying $6,580 in credit card debt alone. Auto loan delinquencies just hit a 32-year high, and nearly 1 in 4 people using Buy Now, Pay Later couldn't even make their payment on time. So before you laugh at the Dutch and their tulips, I need you to understand something. The exact same financial mistake has been repeated by every single generation for nearly 400 years. And odds are, you're making it right now. This isn't a video about budgeting. This isn't going to be some condescending lecture about avocado toast. What I want to show you today is the deep structural pattern behind why smart people, entire generations of smart people, keep walking into the same financial trap over and over again, despite having more access to information than any humans who have ever lived. Let's get into it. So what is this mistake? I'll give it to you in one sentence. Every generation confuses access to money with the creation of wealth. That is it. That is the core delusion that has wrecked household balance sheets. From the Dutch Republic in the 1600s to the United States in 2026. The packaging changes, the asset class changes, the marketing gets slicker, but the underlying behavior is identical. Let me walk you through it, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Phase 1. A new financial innovation emerges. It could be a new type of credit, a new asset class, a new technology for moving money around. It feels revolutionary. It feels like the rules have changed. Phase 2. Access to this innovation gets democratized. Suddenly, ordinary people, not just bankers, not just the wealthy, can participate. And that democratization feels like progress. It feels like freedom. Phase 3. People begin mistaking participation for prosperity. They confuse the ability to borrow with the ability to afford. They confuse the ability to speculate with the ability to invest. They confuse the feeling of spending with the reality of building wealth. Phase 4. Reality reasserts itself. Prices correct, debts come due, and an entire generation gets its financial education the hard way, through loss. Then, and here is the critical part, the next generation grows up, assumes that mistake was unique to their parents' era, and proceeds to repeat it with whatever shiny new instrument their generation offers. This cycle has never in the recorded history of financial markets been broken. Not once. Let me prove it to you. Let us start with the obvious one. Tulip Mania, 1636 to 1637. The Netherlands was the wealthiest, most commercially sophisticated nation on earth at the time. These were not stupid people. The Dutch had invented the stock exchange. They were global traders. And yet, when futures contracts for tulip bulbs became available to regular citizens, when access was democratized, prices went parabolic. People traded their life savings for a single Semper Augustus bulb. And when the mania broke, the financial wreckage lasted for years. Fast forward to 1720, the South Sea bubble, same pattern, different wrapper. The South Sea Company sold the British public on the idea that they could get rich. From trade monopolies in South America, the stock went vertical. Isaac Newton, arguably the smartest human being who had ever lived up to that point, initially invested, made money, sold, watched the price keep going up, bought back in at the top, and lost the equivalent of several $1 million in today's money. He reportedly said afterward, "I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. The pattern doesn't care how smart you are." Now let's jump ahead. The Roaring Twenties. For the first time in American history, ordinary workers could buy stocks on margin. You put down 10%, your broker lent you the other 90. Access was democratized. The market roared. Shoeshine boys were giving stock tips. And then October 1929 happened. The Dow lost nearly 90% of its value over the next 3 years. Millions of families lost everything. Not because they were gamblers by nature, but because they confused access to leverage with access to wealth. And here is where it gets personal for many of you watching this: the dot-com bubble, late 1990s. The internet was going to change everything, and it did. That part was true. But the financial behavior around it was identical to every bubble before it. Online brokerages made it easy for anyone to trade tech stocks. The Nasdaq rose 600% between 1995 and March 2000. Pets.com was valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. By 2002, the Nasdaq had fallen 78% from its peak. 100 million individual investors lost an estimated $5 trillion. 70% of individual investors' portfolios at Vanguard were worth less than what they had originally put in. Then came 2008, the subprime mortgage crisis. Same exact pattern. Financial innovation, mortgage-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations made it easy to extend credit to people who couldn't afford it. Access was democratized. Anyone with a pulse could get a mortgage. People who earned $30,000 a year were buying $400,000 homes. It felt like wealth. It was debt. U.S. household net worth declined by nearly $13 trillion. When the bubble burst, 10 million Americans lost their homes. Housing prices fell nearly 30%. And I need you to hear this, because this is recent, 2021 to 2022. Meme stocks, crypto, SPACs, the GameStop squeeze. Dogecoin, Terra Luna, the exact same behavioral pattern, dressed up in the language of financial democratization and power to the people. Robinhood made trading free. Reddit forums made speculation social. And when the dust settled, retail investors were down an estimated $350 billion in 2022 alone. Terra Luna's collapse wiped out $50 billion essentially overnight. FTX stole billions from its own customers. Over $450 billion in crypto value vanished during the Terra Luna crash alone. According to the Bank for International Settlements, every single time the generation experiencing it believed they were different. They believed their version was new. And every single time, the pattern won. So let's talk about right now, because the pattern hasn't stopped. It is just wearing different clothes. As of early 2026, total U.S. credit card debt stands at $1.28 trillion. A record high, up $44 billion in a single quarter. The average American is carrying $6,580 in credit card debt per person. Also, a record. And according to Bankrate, 61% of people carrying credit card balances have been in debt for at least a year, up from 53% just in late 2024. That means the debt isn't being used for temporary cash flow management. It is structural. It is a way of life. Auto loans are arguably worse. Subprime auto loan delinquencies hit 6.9% in January 2026, a new high. Overall, auto loan delinquencies have reached their highest level in 32 years. People are financing $40,000 and $50,000 vehicles on 72 and 84-month loans because the monthly payment looks manageable, but the total cost is devastating. They're underwater on the asset before the new car smell fades. And then there is buy now, pay later. This is the financial innovation that should terrify you the most. because it is the most perfectly designed version of this trap ever created. Holiday shoppers put $10 billion worth of purchases on BNPL plans. Just in November 2025, $1 billion in a single day, Cyber Monday alone. Nearly 1 in 4 BNPL users paid late. And here is the kicker. BNPL debt often doesn't show up on traditional credit reports, which means the true scale of consumer indebtedness is actually worse than the official numbers suggest. BNPL is, in its design, almost identical to the margin accounts of the 1920s. It separates the feeling of buying from the reality of paying. The personal savings rate in the United States as of February 2026 is 4%. 4. The historical average, going back to 1959, is 8.39%. At its lowest point in July 2005, right before the housing crash, it was 1.4%. We're not at that extreme, but we are well below what any economist would consider a healthy buffer. Meanwhile, 8 in 10 Americans report feeling financial stress heading into 2026. According to the National Endowment for Financial Education and U.S. adults correctly answered, only 49% of basic financial literacy questions in the latest national assessment, half. A coin flip, and yet 64% of Americans rate their own financial knowledge as good or excellent. That gap between perceived competence and actual competence is precisely where this generational mistake lives. Now, layer on top of all this the macroeconomic environment. The U.S. national debt just passed $39 trillion. That is $289,000 per each household. The government is spending approximately $900 billion per year just on interest payments. Inflation, while cooling from its 2022 peak, is being pushed back up by tariff costs. Morningstar is forecasting 2.7% inflation for 2026, with the Budget Lab at Yale noting that tariffs have already driven core goods prices up 1.9% year over year. Mortgage rates are hovering around 6 to 6.5%, double what they were just a few years ago. And housing affordability, according to Realtor.com, mortgage rates would need to fall to 2.65%, or incomes would need to roughly double just to return to what felt normal before the pandemic. The system is not set up for you to win by default. And the mistake that every generation makes, confusing access to credit with genuine financial progress, is more dangerous right now than it has been at almost any point in modern history. Alright, so the question isn't really, what is the mistake? I've shown you that. The real question is, why does it keep working? Why does every generation fall for the same thing? 3 reasons. First, the financial industry profits from your confusion. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it is a business model. Credit card companies make money when you carry a balance. Auto lenders make money on longer loan terms with higher total interest. BNPL companies make money from merchant fees and late payment penalties. The entire consumer finance apparatus is engineered to make debt feel like purchasing power. When Klarna or Afterpay splits your purchase into 4 easy payments, they're not doing you a favor. They're removing the friction that your brain uses to evaluate whether you can actually afford something. Behavioral economists call this pain of paying, the psychological discomfort you feel when you hand over cash. Every financial innovation Ivy described in this video, from 1920s margin accounts to 2026 BNPL apps, has been designed to reduce that pain. And when you reduce the pain of paying, people pay for things they cannot afford. Every time. Second, we have a cultural mythology around debt that is almost entirely backwards. We treat homeownership as inherently virtuous, even when the mortgage is financially destructive. We treat car payments as normal, even when the vehicle is depreciating faster than your building equity. We treat student loans as good debt, even when the degree doesn't generate the income to service it. Debt is treated as a rite of passage rather than what it actually is, a financial instrument that must be evaluated coldly on its terms every single time. The phrase, "everyone has a car payment," has done more financial damage to the American middle class than any recession. Third, and this is the deepest one, every generation suffers from what psychologists call temporal discounting, combined with generational amnesia. Temporal discounting means you value present rewards more heavily than future costs. That is just how human brains work. But generational amnesia compounds it. The people who lived through 2008 learned, painfully, to be cautious with mortgage debt, but their children, who were too young to feel that pain, are now entering a housing market with the same reckless optimism, just pointed at different instruments. Gen Z didn't live through the dot-com crash, so they had no intuitive defense against the meme stock mania of 2021. Millennials didn't live through the stagflation of the 1970s, so they had no visceral understanding of what sustained inflation does to purchasing power. The lesson is always learned. It is just never inherited. And this is why financial literacy statistics are so bleak. It is not that information isn't available. There is more financial education content online right now than has existed in all of prior human history. The problem is that knowing something intellectually is not the same as understanding it experientially. You can read about the dot-com crash. You can watch documentaries about 2008, but until you've personally watched an account balance collapse, the knowledge stays theoretical, and theoretical knowledge doesn't change behavior. So what do you actually do about this? Because I'm not going to end this video by just telling you, be careful with money. That is useless. Here is what actually works, and I'll be blunt about it. Number 1, you have to decouple your identity from your consumption. The reason lifestyle inflation is so lethal, and nearly half of Americans earning over $100,000 a year are still living paycheck to paycheck, is because spending becomes identity. The car you drive, the apartment you rent, the brands you wear, these become how you signal status, and the financial system is more than happy to lend you the money to maintain that signal at 22% interest. The single most powerful financial decision you can make isn't an investment pick. It is the decision to build wealth silently, to let the gap between what you earn and what you spend grow wider as your income increases, rather than narrower. That is it. That is the whole game. And almost nobody plays it because it is boring, and because nobody on social media is going to congratulate you for driving a paid-off Honda when your salary says you could lease a BMW. Number 2, you need to understand the difference between an asset and a liability at a gut level, not just an intellectual one. Your home is not an asset if the carrying cost is consuming 45% of your income. Your car is not an asset, full stop. A finance vacation is not self-care, it is a loan. I don't say this to be harsh. I say this because the language of consumer marketing has systematically blurred these distinctions, and your financial survival depends on seeing through it. Number 3, use the historical pattern to your advantage. If you know that every generation gets offered a new version of easy credit disguised as opportunity, then you can train yourself to ask one question every time a new financial product is marketed to you. Who profits if I use this, and how? If the answer is a financial institution profits from the interest, fees, or data generated by my participation, then you are not the customer, you are the product. That doesn't mean you never use credit. It means you use it with eyes open, on your terms, with a payoff plan that exists before you ever swipe. And number 4, close the gap between perceived and actual financial literacy. Remember that stat? Americans correctly answer 49% of financial literacy questions, but 64% rate themselves as financially knowledgeable. That gap is where the damage happens. If you're watching this video, you're probably more financially curious than the average person. Good, but curiosity isn't competence. Sit down this week and take a real, honest inventory. What is your net worth? Not your income, your net worth. What is your actual savings rate? What is the total interest you're paying across all debts? If you don't know those numbers cold, you are navigating one of the most consequential areas of your life with your eyes closed. And no generation that navigated blind ever came out ahead. Here is the thing that gets me about this topic. The Dutch tulip speculators weren't too dumb. The 1920s margin traders weren't too dumb. The 2008 subprime borrowers weren't too dumb. The 2021 meme stock traders weren't too dumb. They were human. They responded to incentives, social pressure, and financial products specifically designed to exploit how human brains evaluate risk and reward. The mistake isn't stupidity. The mistake is thinking you're immune to a pattern that has defeated smarter people than you in more favorable conditions than yours. For 4 centuries straight, the US national debt is $39 trillion. Household credit card debt is at an all-time high. The savings rate is half its historical average. Auto loan delinquencies haven't been this bad since the early 1990s, and a new generation is layering on buy now, pay later obligations that don't even show up in the official numbers. This is not a drill. This is the pattern running in real time with your money. The one advantage you have, the only advantage any generation has ever had, is the ability to recognize the pattern before it completes. You're watching this video. That means you're paying attention. Now, the question is whether you'll actually do something different. Because every generation gets the information. Almost none of them act on it. Don't be almost none of them. I'll see you in the next one.